Top 5 ships that vanished without a trace. Imagine this. You're standing on the deck of a ship in the middle of the ocean. Nothing but endless blue water in every direction, no land in sight. The sun sets, night falls, and the sea becomes a dark abyss. Now imagine waking up the next morning to find the ship completely abandoned. No crew, no captain. Meals left half finished, the sails still up. But not a single living soul aboard. That's the kind of nightmare that has haunted sailors for centuries. The ocean has always been the greatest mystery of our planet. It covers more than 70 of the Earth, yet we know shockingly little about it. We've mapped the surface of Mars more thoroughly than the bottom of the sea. And maybe that's why stories of ships that vanish without a trace cut so deeply into our imagination. They aren't just tragedies. They're reminders of how powerless we are against the vast unknown. Tonight, we're diving into 5 of the most famous ships in history that disappeared without explanation. These are not just stories about storms or shipwrecks. These are tales of vessels that seem to slip right out of reality, leaving behind questions that still chill us to this day. So grab your lantern, step aboard, and prepare yourself, because once we set sail, there's no turning back. Story 1, The Mystery of the Mary Celeste, 1872. If you've ever heard of a ghost ship, chances are you've heard of the Mary Celeste. It's the most famous abandoned ship in history, and for good reason. The details are so bizarre, so unsettling, that they sound like the plot of a horror movie. But this story is all too real. The year was 1872. The Mary Celeste, an American merchant brigantine, set sail from New York bound for Genoa, Italy. On board were Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter, and a crew of 7. A normal voyage, nothing unusual. But just a month later, the British ship Dei Gratia stumbled upon the Mary Celeste drifting aimlessly in the Atlantic, near the Azores. What they found has puzzled the world ever since. The Mary Celeste was completely seaworthy. Her sails were up. The cargo, 700 barrels of industrial alcohol, was untouched. There was plenty of food and water. The crew's personal belongings were still there. Even the captain's logbook was up to date. But the people? Gone. Every last one. It was like they had just stepped off the ship into thin air. The lifeboat was missing, suggesting they abandoned ship. But here's the catch. There was no reason to. The Mary Celeste wasn't sinking. She wasn't on fire. She wasn't damaged enough to warrant escape. In fact, the crew of the Dei Gratia actually sailed her safely to port. So why would everyone just leave a perfectly good ship? That's where the theories begin. Some say it was pirates, but nothing was stolen. Others suggest the crew mutinied, but why would they leave behind their supplies and cargo? A popular idea is that the alcohol in the cargo might have leaked, creating dangerous fumes. Maybe the crew feared an explosion and abandoned ship in panic, only to be lost at sea. But investigators found no sign of such an explosion, and of course, the darker theories. Some whisper about sea monsters, giant squids, or even paranormal abductions. After all, how do you explain a ship that's fine, but a crew that vanishes into nothing? The Mary Celeste became so legendary that even Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, wrote a fictional story inspired by it. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened to Captain Briggs, his family, and his crew. The ship itself went on to sail for years under different owners, but its reputation as a cursed vessel never disappeared. When people talk about ships that vanish, the Mary Celeste is the ghost that started it all. A reminder that sometimes the ocean keeps its secrets forever. Story 2, The Vanishing of the USS Cyclops, 1918. If the Mary Celeste is the most famous ghost ship of all time, then the USS Cyclops is one of the greatest vanished ships in American history. And here's the chilling part. It didn't just vanish. It took over 300 people with it. To this day, not a single piece of wreckage has ever been found. Let's set the stage. The year was 1918, near the end of World War I. The USS Cyclops was a massive U.S. Navy collier. Basically, a transport ship designed to carry tons of coal and fuel to keep the fleet running. It was a beast of a ship, over 540 feet long, with a displacement of nearly 20,000 tons. It was the largest ship in the Navy service at the time. On March 4th, the Cyclops left the island of Barbados, heading north toward Baltimore. On board were 306 people, crew, officers, and passengers, along with more than 10,000 tons of manganese ore, a heavy metal used in steel production. It was supposed to be a straightforward voyage, but somewhere in the stretch of ocean between Barbados and the U.S. mainland, the Cyclops simply vanished. No distress signal, no SOS, no final message, just gone. When the ship failed to arrive in Baltimore, the Navy launched one of the largest search efforts in its history up to that point. They scoured the sea, ships patrolled the routes, but there was nothing. No debris, no oil slicks, not even a broken lifeboat drifting in the waves. It was as if the Cyclops had been swallowed whole by the ocean. And here's where it gets even stranger. The area where it vanished is smack in the middle of what later became known as the Bermuda Triangle, that infamous patch of ocean between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico that has been blamed for countless disappearances of ships and planes. Theories about what happened to the Cyclops range from the logical to the completely bizarre. Some historians suggest it might have been a structural failure. The ship was carrying an enormous load of manganese ore, and some think it might have been unevenly distributed, causing the ship to list and possibly capsize in rough seas. But again, even if it sank, why was there no wreckage ever found? Others point to bad weather. Records show there were storms in the area at the time, but this was a massive naval ship built to handle harsh conditions. Could a storm really wipe it out without leaving a trace? Then there's the human factor. Some rumors claim the captain, George W. Worley, was unstable. Reports from crew members described him as harsh, erratic, and even paranoid. Some even suspected he might have been pro-German during World War I, raising whispers of sabotage or mutiny. Did the crew turn against him? Did the ship fall victim to a hidden act of war? But the lack of evidence only fuels the supernatural explanations. The Bermuda Triangle lore exploded in the decades after the Cyclops vanished. People began to speculate. Magnetic anomalies, rogue waves, alien abductions, even dimensional portals. The Cyclops became the centerpiece of this mythology, the ultimate unsolved case. And here's the eerie legacy. The Cyclops wasn't the only ship of its kind to disappear. Two of its sister ships, the Proteus and the Nereus, also vanished without a trace during World War II while carrying heavy ore. The odds of three nearly identical ships all going missing in roughly similar circumstances is beyond unsettling. Today, more than a century later, the fate of the USS Cyclops remains unsolved. No wreck has ever been discovered despite modern sonar and exploration. It is still considered the single largest loss of life in U.S. naval history, not caused by direct combat. Think about that. 300 men and women, one of the biggest ships of its time, and 10,000 tons of cargo. Gone, as if the ocean itself decided to erase it. Whenever sailors pass through the Bermuda Triangle, the legend of the Cyclops hangs heavy in the air. Some whisper that it still sails down there in the deep, trapped in time, its crew doomed to wander forever. But one thing is certain. Whatever happened to the USS Cyclops proves that the sea doesn't give up its secrets easily. Sometimes it doesn't give them up at all. Story 3. The ghost ship MV Joyita, were 1955. If the Mary Celeste is the queen of ghost ship mysteries, then the MV Joyita is like her eerie little sister, the one that makes you question what can possibly drive an entire crew to vanish, leaving behind a ship that seems frozen in time. The year was 1955, and the Joyita was a merchant vessel operating in the South Pacific. She wasn't a glamorous ocean liner, more of a rugged workhorse used for carrying cargo, passengers, and mail between small islands. On October 3rd of that year, the Joyita left Samoa bound for the Tokelau Islands, a relatively short trip of about 270 miles. On board were 25 people, crew and passengers, along with medical supplies, food, and trade goods. The journey was supposed to take just 2 days, but when the Joyita failed to arrive, alarms were raised. A massive search and rescue effort was launched across the Pacific. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing. It seemed like the Joyita had simply vanished. But then, 5 weeks later, she was found. A British patrol vessel spotted the Joyita drifting nearly 600 miles off course, north of Fiji, and what they found on board was enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. The ship was afloat but badly damaged. She was listing to one side, her port engine was out of order, and the deck was partly flooded, but she wasn't sinking. She was still seaworthy, battered but afloat, and yet there was no one on board. All 25 passengers and crew had vanished. Here's where it gets chilling. The Joyita looked as if the people had left in a hurry. The lifeboats were gone. The ship's radio was tuned to the international distress frequency, but its wiring was mysteriously cut. Cargo was missing too, including the medical supplies. The logbook and navigational equipment were gone as well. But everything else, personal belongings, food, supplies, was still there. It was the Mary Celeste all over again, only in the modern era. So what happened to the crew of the Joyita? Investigators at the time struggled for answers. One theory was that the ship had started taking on water due to a leaking pipe, and the captain ordered everyone into the lifeboats, fearing the vessel would sink. But that doesn't explain why they didn't stay close by, or why the Joyita was still afloat weeks later when she was found. Others suggest piracy. The South Pacific in the 1950s wasn't exactly free of danger. Could the ship have been boarded, the crew taken or killed, and the vessel left adrift? But again, why leave behind most of the cargo and valuables? There's also the theory of a mutiny or conflict on board. Some argue that tensions between the captain and crew might have boiled over, leading to violence, panic, and abandonment of ship. But without bodies or wreckage, it's impossible to prove. And then there are the darker, stranger ideas. Some point out the eerie similarities between the Joyita and the Mary Celeste. Two ships, decades apart, both found perfectly afloat but eerily deserted. Coincidence? Or something else at play in the vast, mysterious oceans of the world? Here's a chilling detail. When she was discovered, the Joyita still had plenty of fuel and provisions, enough to last weeks. In fact, there was even evidence the crew had been patching leaks and trying to keep the ship running before abandoning her. That means they weren't clueless. They were fighting to keep her afloat, and then suddenly, they were just gone. The Joyita was eventually towed back to shore and repaired. Incredibly, she continued sailing for many years, earning the nickname the Cursed Ship because of her dark reputation. She even sank a few more times before being abandoned for good in the 1970s. But no trace of her missing passengers or crew has ever been found. Think about that for a second. 25 people simply erased from existence. No wreckage, no bodies, no answers. Just a battered ship drifting silently across the Pacific like a floating tomb. The mystery of the Joyita reminds us that even in modern times, with radios, search planes, and organized rescue missions, the ocean can still make entire groups of people vanish, leaving only haunting questions behind. Some call her the Mary Celeste of the Pacific. Others call her proof that the sea doesn't just swallow ships. Sometimes it swallows souls. Story 4. The Titanic of the South. SS Waratah, 1909. Some ships vanish quietly. Others disappear so spectacularly that they carve their names into maritime legend forever. The SS Waratah belongs in the second category. Known as the Titanic of the South, this passenger liner was supposed to be the pride of Australian shipping. Instead, it became one of the ocean's greatest unsolved mysteries. The Waratah was built in 1908 by the Blue Anchor Line, designed to carry both passengers and cargo between Europe and Australia. At over 500 feet long and 9,000 tons, she was a massive vessel for her time, luxurious for travelers, but also engineered to haul tons of goods like wool, ore, and grain. Her nickname, the Titanic of the South, came from her size and her promise to bring world-class travel to the Southern Hemisphere. On her maiden voyage from London to Sydney, people already noticed something strange. Passengers reported that the Waratah had an odd tendency to roll heavily in the waves, not enough to sink her, but enough to make people uneasy. Some sailors whispered that she was top-heavy, with too much weight stacked above the waterline, but she completed her first voyage without incident, and those warnings were brushed aside. Her second voyage, though, would be her last. In late July 1909, the Waratah left Durban, South Africa, bound for Cape Town with 201 people on board, passengers, crew, and officers. She never made it. Here's what we know. On July 26th, she was spotted by another ship, the Clan McIntyre, steaming steadily along the South African coast. The two vessels even exchanged signals. Everything seemed fine, but after that, nothing. The Waratah never arrived in Cape Town. She had simply disappeared into the sea. No distress calls, no wreckage, no survivors. The disappearance sparked a huge search effort. Ships scoured the coastline. Even decades later, expeditions returned again and again, hunting for wreckage. But not a single piece of the Waratah has ever been found. So what happened to the Titanic of the South? One of the leading theories is structural instability. Remember those early complaints about her being top-heavy? Some experts believe that in heavy seas, she might have rolled too far to one side and capsized suddenly, leaving no time to launch lifeboats or send a signal. If that's true, the Waratah could have gone down in minutes. But that doesn't explain the complete lack of wreckage. Even the Titanic left debris scattered across the ocean. How could a ship that big simply vanish without a trace? Another theory points to rogue waves. The South African coast, especially near the Wild Coast in the Agulhas Current, is notorious for producing enormous, freak waves that can tower as high as buildings. If the Waratah encountered one of these rogue waves, it could have struck with enough force to sink her instantly. Survivors? Wreckage? Gone in the chaos of the storm. Then there's the darker speculation. Some whisper about explosions in the cargo hold, or even sabotage. Others believe she might have been pulled into deep underwater canyons along the South African seabed, leaving her entombed thousands of feet below, far out of reach of early 20th century search technology. But the lack of answers gave rise to something else: legend. For decades after her disappearance, sailors along the South African coast claimed to see the ghostly outline of a great steamship drifting silently in the waves. They swore it was the Waratah, cursed to sail forever without making port. Local folklore even calls her the Phantom Ship of the South. And here's the chilling part. Despite numerous expeditions, including high-tech searches in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the wreck of the Waratah has still never been located. More than 100 years later, her fate remains one of the sea's greatest mysteries. 211 people vanished. No bodies, no wreckage. Just a ghost ship story so powerful that it's still told today in Australia and South Africa. The Waratah is proof that even in the age of steel ships and global travel, the ocean could still swallow a vessel whole and keep its secrets buried in the deep. Story 5. The terrifying mystery of the SS Orang Medan, 1947. If the Mary Celeste is unsettling and the Waratah is haunting, then the story of the Orang Medan is flat out terrifying. This is the one that sounds like a horror movie, and yet it comes from real maritime lore. The year was 1947. In the waters of the Strait of Malacca, near Indonesia, a distress signal crackled over the radios of nearby ships. The source, a Dutch freighter named the SS Orang Medan. The message was chilling. The first transmission was garbled, but rescuers made out fragments like, "All officers, including captain, dead. Lying in chart room and bridge. Possibly whole crew dead." Moments later, another transmission came through. Just 2 words: "I die." Then silence. Naturally, nearby ships responded. An American vessel, the Silver Star, was closest and rushed to the Orang Medan's position. After hours of searching, they spotted her. A freighter, seemingly intact, drifting silently on calm waters. No signs of damage, but no one answering hails either. A boarding party went across. What they found still sends shivers down the spine. The deck was littered with bodies. The crew of the Orang Medan were dead. All of them. But it wasn't just that they had died. It was how they had died. Their eyes were wide open, mouths frozen in silent screams, faces twisted in expressions of sheer terror. Some were found lying on their backs, arms outstretched as if fighting off some invisible attacker. Others clutched at nothing, their fingers curled like claws. Even the ship's dog was dead, found with bared teeth in a grotesque snarl. And yet there were no injuries, no signs of struggle, no blood, no wounds. It was as if the entire crew had died of pure, unimaginable fear. Down in the boiler room, rescuers reported that the atmosphere felt stiflingly hot, even though the boilers themselves weren't running. There was no obvious cause of death, no hint of what had happened. The boarding party decided to tow the Orang Medan back to port, but before they could, something happened. Smoke began pouring from the ship's hold. Then, an explosion ripped through the freighter. The crew of the Silver Star barely escaped before the Orang Medan went up in flames and sank beneath the waves, taking her horrifying secrets with her. To this day, the Orang Medan remains one of the most terrifying ghost ship stories ever told. But was it real? Skeptics argue that there's no record of a Dutch freighter by that name, and that the story may be a mix of rumor and legend. The first reports came from newspapers in the late 1940s and 1950s, and details vary wildly. Some say it was a cover-up. Others claim the ship was carrying dangerous chemicals, maybe even wartime nerve agents left over from World War II. A leak could have poisoned the crew, leading to their horrific deaths. But that doesn't explain the expressions of sheer terror or the creepy final message, "I die." Other theories drift into the supernatural. Some suggest the crew encountered something otherworldly, a ghostly presence, an alien force, or a cursed object in the cargo hold. Some even whisper that the Orang Medan wasn't a normal freighter at all, but part of a secret military experiment gone horribly wrong. Whatever the truth, the legend of the Orang Medan has become a staple of maritime mystery. Even if the ship never officially existed, the story refuses to die, much like the frozen faces of her crew, forever screaming across the ocean's memory. So there you have it, Mary Celeste, the original ghost ship. USS Cyclops, the giant swallowed by the Bermuda Triangle. MV Joyda, the Pacific's Mary Celeste. SS Waratah, the Titanic of the South. Orang Medan, the ship of death and terror. 5 vessels, hundreds of lives, and not a single clear answer. Each of these stories reminds us that the ocean, for all our technology and knowledge, is still a place of deep mystery. It's vast, it's powerful, and sometimes it doesn't give back what it takes. If you've made it this far, thank you for sailing with me through these chilling tales. Don't forget to subscribe to Drowned Legends so you don't miss the next voyage into the unknown. Because as you've just seen, the sea has plenty more secrets waiting to be told.